like to say a big warm welcome to our Year 5 Sixers that are back for Term 4. And we are so hoping that this is just a short return until we're all back on site, everybody. So hang in there, kiddos. We have got a very special surprise for you today to start off and kick off our term. So I would like to welcome a local author by the name of Dee White. So I have known Dee for a number of years, and she lives in the Macedon Ranges, pardon me, and has worked really super hard to achieve her dream of being a published and well-known author. So welcome, Dee. Nice to have you with us.
Very nice to be here.
I like the display that's happening in the background there. Lots of books that I can see that I've had a read of.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Dee, just inspiring our young writers, can you share with us what it is that you love most about writing?
I think I love the freedom, and it's just the opportunity to use my imagination and be able to create characters and be able to step into story worlds that can be quite different to the world we're actually living in now. So it's just having that freedom to create and to write what you want to write. And also you have a bit of power, you get to create the characters you want and you get to decide what they do and what happens to them and all that sort of thing. So that's a bit of fun too.
So you get to be boss and be
Absolutely,
creative.
Yeah.
You've got control of the pen.
You do.
When did you first notice, Dee, your passion for writing? Can you think back to that moment in time when...
Yeah, absolutely, even though it was a long time ago. I was 7 when I decided I wanted to be a writer, and we'd been asked to write a poem for a particular occasion at school, and I got asked to read mine out at assembly, which was really terrifying, but it also was quite inspiring because I got such a good reaction to it, and to see how people responded to my writing was so inspiring, and I decided I'm going to be a writer now. And it just seemed like I've always loved words. I was always loved reading, even from that age. So it just seemed a natural progression for me. And it's fun. I get to write in my pajamas. So don't have to go into work. And
so a really vivid memory, though, of a time when you made that decision.
Absolutely. And I can still remember the poem that I wrote. And I can remember how terrified I was reading it out at school assembly too.
Dee, so having browsed your website, and we can get a bit of a glimpse there behind you, but I've noticed there that you've got a collection on your website also, a collection of picture books, but also of chapter fiction. So can you tell us a little bit more about why you write those types or genres that you've got behind you?
Yeah, I write really lots of different kinds of books. So this is purely non-fiction. And Rena's Rainbow, which is the painting behind me, is actually an original painting from the book by the artist. So that's a picture book. So with this one, very few words, but a lot of lovely illustrations by Tracy Grimwood, who is the amazing illustrator. And then Beyond Belief, which you can see behind me, that's quite a series. That's a historical fiction set in World War II. And at the same time I was writing that, I was actually writing Eddie Popcorn's Guide to Parent Training, which, as you can see, is quite different. So this is illustrated. It's a humorous chapter book. And so I just love the freedom, like I said, of being able to write different things. And because Beyond Belief was so intense and so serious to do all the research and to write it, and it was also quite personal because some of it was inspired by my own family history and history of family members who went through the Holocaust. So it was quite serious and intense. So it was really great to have Eddie Popcorn to work on at the same time and just, have a bit of light relief. And some authors just work on one thing at once, but I'm the sort of person that I like to have quite a few projects on the go. And that seems to really work for me. And I one can inspire the other.
Yeah, and I think we would, see that in our classrooms, that we have students that just work on the one piece and want to see that through from, when they're drafting and then they're revising. And then there are those students that can, have more than one project on. So it's nice to know there's not a right way, not to pigeonhole yourself, that, that you can write so widely just from those ideas that you generate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can get more than one idea from the same book. Like you might be writing a story, and then you get an idea for another one, and that's fine too. And actually finishing a story is one of the hardest parts. And even for writers like me, we find finishing stories really hard. So sometimes it can be good to just walk away and give yourself some thinking time to work out how you want to finish a story, because thinking time is about half of what being a writer is about. It's not just about sitting down and writing the words. It's also about thinking about the story and thinking about the characters and what you want to happen in your story.
Yeah, such a complex process, isn't it? But rewarding.
It is, but it's so much fun.
Yeah. So also, Dee, you've written for young audiences, but then also you've got older primary audiences, a young adult. Yep. So do you have plans to write anything for mature adult audiences, or have you already?
Well, actually, at the moment, I'm working on a screenplay, so a film about crocodiles. So it's a horror movie with a friend of mine who's a screenwriter. And I'm also working on an adult thriller. So I'm probably towards the end of the first draft. I've got about 80,000 words. So I'm just kind of sitting on that at the moment and just working through it and looking at, have I developed the characters enough? Is the story interesting enough? Is there enough suspense? Will readers guess what's going to happen in the story? Because that's one of the things about writing. It's not just about having fun as a writer. It's about thinking about the readers and who's going to read your story. And you really want them to take something away from it.
Yeah, and I think, that's so important that, I know, you keep going back and you just keep making it better.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, Eddie Popcorn, I started that when my son was 11 and he's now 22, almost 23.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and it was just that I hadn't really worked out how to put it together. I kind of knew I had this story about parent training, but it took me a while to develop the character and then to work out how to put it all together and how to give my character a story. So it just it really varies. Like this book, Letters to Leonardo here, which is the one for teenagers, that took 10 years to write. So Eddie Popcorn, the first one, well, I started when my son was 11, but the second one I wrote in about 4 weeks, so 3 or 4 weeks. So the first draft. So it really, really varies. And some of it's to do with the inspiration, and some of it, like with Eddie, I kind of already had the character so strong in my head. And so I kind of knew what was going to happen to him next.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to see how they evolve though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like you said, it can be over a shorter time frame, but then it can be over decades.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And they're the ones that actually, it's nice to not have the pressure of a deadline. But these days I tend to have a few deadline pressures, which can be good. And I know when you're writing at school, you have lots of deadline pressures. And so you kind of have to get used to actually being able to write to a deadline.
Yeah. And you've also written, so not only for a wide variety of audiences and different types of books, but also on a wide variety of topics. So you mentioned your historical fiction there, which is what our students just written last term. But then you've also got the story about the dog tales, the dog stories, the canine. Yep, I don't know if you've got that there.
Yep, Canine Heroes. So that's, inspired. They're true stories about dogs who save people's lives. So that was fun researching that one too.
So where do those ideas, or where do all these ideas come from?
They all come from really different places. As you know, I'm a big animal lover. So often there is an animal somewhere in my story. And I guess the one about Canine Heroes, I'd read so many books about people saving animals. And, I knew from my own experiences that there were some animals that actually saved people's lives. And we actually had a dog that you may recall that saved a couple of kittens, and we ended up with one of those kittens. And so...
Yes, I do.
Yes. And so, I just wanted, to write this story about dogs and the brave things that they do. And Beyond Belief was actually inspired by, I was actually researching another story in Paris when I came across the story of the Muslims who had saved Jewish children during World War II. And so that was a story I really wanted to write. Eddie Popcorn, I actually thought was based on my son, but it wasn't until I did a blog interview that I realised that it was actually probably more about me. I was way naughtier at school than my kids were. So I think it's actually more about me, to be honest. So, it's like I use things from my own personal experiences, from my life, things that my pets do, stories that I get told. So Letters to Leonardo, which is about a boy who gets a birthday card on his 15th birthday from his mother, but he'd been told that she died 10 years ago. So that was actually inspired by a true story that someone told me about someone they worked with. And when he was 21, he got a letter from his mother and found out that she was alive. I sometimes get ideas from other stories I read and from newspapers. I wrote this story once about an elephant, and there was a boy who was about 11 or 12. He gets home from school and finds an elephant stuck in his driveway. So it was a funny story, and it was about all the things that the elephant ended up in the swimming pool. But that was actually inspired by a story I read about a man who came home from work and found an elephant stuck in his driveway between the house and the fence.
Oh,
and
very unexpected.
So it was a true story. It had escaped from a circus. You just kind of hear these things. So as a writer, I always like to keep my eyes and ears open. I always carry a pen with me and a notebook, and I write things on my phone in the Notes app. And I actually taught myself to write in the dark, because often at night is when I think of my best ideas, just as I'm dropping off to sleep. And I used to think I would remember them in the morning, but I never do. So I have a pen and paper next to my bed, and I taught myself how to write in the dark so that in the morning I would still have those ideas and I wouldn't have forgotten them. Yeah. Nowadays it's a bit easier because I can just use my phone.
Whatever works, Dee.
Yeah.
That brings me to my next question. So at Sunbury Heights, we have our students using a writer's notebook, their inspiration, or a place to put those ideas, and nothing might evolve with some of them, and then some of them, turn into amazing pieces. So do you have your phone sort of and your notebook a bit like that? Or do you have something else where it then goes to the next stage?
Yeah, I tend to have an ideas journal. And then when I start a project or a book, I have a journal just for that particular book. So with Beyond Belief here, you can see there's lots of things that I've stuck in it. There'll be research things and notes about the story. Usually at the back, I might have photos of my characters. So I like to have a photo of my character. It helps me imagine them and helps them seem real to me. So I might put that in the back of my journal. And I kind of try and find journals that are relevant to the story that I'm writing. So this was kind of like an old typewriter, old-fashioned kind of story. This one here is my journal for Paris hunting, which is what I was working on when I found the story Beyond Belief. And this one's about a boy who's looking for a family inheritance in Paris, and he's actually being hunted. And he ends up at the Paris Museum of Hunting, which is why the deer is relevant. So and then I have things like this. This is my journal for a book I'm working on at the moment. So I love collecting journals. A lot of writers do, but I find it quite handy to have not just an ideas book, but to just have something specific for the project that I'm working on.
Yeah. And then would you draft, when that's all coming together, are you drafting on paper with pen, or are you better on a screen?
Yep. So this is my current work in progress. And so I write it all out by hand first.
80,000 words.
Yeah. And because I find that, sometimes I won't do the whole draft by hand. But what I often do, I usually try and do the first draft by hand, because I feel like it brings me a lot closer to the story when I'm writing by hand. I can immerse myself more in it and not be distracted by other things on the screen. And also it means I can take it with me, so I can go and sit in the park and write if I want. Or if I'm, like when I was in Paris, I spent a month in Paris, and so I would sit on a park bench and write about the surroundings. So I like to write by hand, and then I type it out. And then sometimes I will rewrite a scene by hand, or, if I'm stuck, if I can't work out what to write next, I'll often use my notebook.
Dee, just before we finish up, what would be your best piece of advice you could give our student writers at Sunbury Heights?
It's really hard to give just one tip because, there is so much involved in writing, as you know. But I think for me, it's about writing what interests you, and also about trying different things, because that's how you become a better writer. And that's why I'm trying screenwriting and all these sorts of things, because they're developing other skills that I need as a writer. And the other thing for me, I read a lot. Like, reading is something that's really great if you want to write, because you learn all about how other authors create their work, and it just gives you ideas for your own writing.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really good advice. We certainly want to keep encouraging the reading.
And also, I think it is important to write what interests you, because then you'll be interested in what you're writing.
And those might be little ideas that they've got in their writer's notebook.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing.
No problem. And if they've got any questions for me, they can contact me on my website. So I'll send you that link, but I'll also put it at the end of this film.
Yeah. I have also got it. It is the kids don't know this yet, but it is in the planner for tomorrow. So the follow-up to this, the kids will be visiting your site tomorrow. They can navigate around that. They've got a little task to do, but also be able to have a chance to learn more about you and other books that you've written.